jihad, an Islamic term, is a religious duty of Muslims. In Arabic, the word jihad translates as a noun meaning struggle, or resisting. The word jihad appears in 23 Quranic verses. Within the context of the classical Islam, particularly the Shiahs' beliefs, it refers to struggle against those who do not believe in the Abrahamic God. However, the word has even wider implications and interpretations. Jihad means to struggle in the way of Allah. Jihad appears 41 times in the Quran and frequently in the idiomatic expression striving in the way of God. A person engaged in jihad is called a mujahid. The plural is mujahideen. Jihad is an important religious duty for Muslims. A minority among the Sunni scholars sometimes refer to this duty as the sixth pillar of Islam, though it occupies no such official status. In Twelver Shi'a Islam, however, jihad is one of the 10 practices of the religion. There are two commonly accepted meanings of jihad, an inner spiritual struggle and an outer physical struggle. The greater jihad is the inner struggle by a believer to fulfill his religious duties. This non-violent meaning is stressed by both Muslim and non-Muslim authors. However, there is consensus amongst Islamic scholars that the concept of jihad will always include armed struggle against persecution and oppression. The lesser jihad is the physical struggle against the enemies of Islam. This physical struggle can take a violent form or a non-violent form. The proponents of the violent form translate jihad as holy war, although some Islamic studies scholars disagree. The Dictionary of Islam and British-American Orientalist Bernard Lewis both argue jihad has a military meaning in the large majority of cases. Some scholars maintain non-violent ways to struggle against the enemies of Islam. An example of this is written debate, often characterized as jihad of the pen. According to the BBC, a third meaning of jihad is the struggle to build a good society. In a commentary of the Hadiths of a Muslim, entitled Al-Minhaj, the medieval Islamic scholar Yahya ibn Sharaf al-Nawawi stated that one of the collective duties of the community as a whole is to lodge a valid protest, to solve problems of religion, to have knowledge of divine law, to command what is right and forbid wrong conduct. Origins: the beginnings of jihad are traced back to the words and actions of Muhammad in the Quran. This encourages the use of jihad against non-Muslims. The Quran, however, never uses the term jihad for fighting and combat in the name of Allah. Qitl is used to mean a fighting. Jihad in the Quran was originally intended for the nearby neighbors of the Muslims, but as time passed and more enemies arose, the Quranic statements supporting jihad were updated for the new adversaries. The first documentation of the law of jihad was written by Abd al-Rahman al-Awzari and Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. The document grew out of debates that had surfaced ever since Muhammad's death. Arabic is primarily a consonantal written language with only a few vowels, specifically, alif and ya. Vowel sounds are designated by diacritical marks called tashkil. The word jihad and its meaning is unique to Islam and never existed, in Arab antiquity, before the advent of Islam from 623 CE to 631 CE. Jihad appears only twice in the Quran as jihād, terahertz, where the omission of the tashkil in the Qurans of Tashkent and Sayna is implied. The first appearance of jihad, in the Quran, is from the 5th chapter revealed in Medina when Muhammad began a series of caravan raids in 623 CE. Ushuo section no Ushuo section Euro degree Ushuo section Uo section Euro registered trademark Uo degree Uo section O to the first Uo Uo to the first Uo foreign Uo Ushuo terahertz Uo OUU florin UUO plus or minus UUO section OMUUO section OO terahertz florin UUO Ushuo registered trademark Euro plus or minus UOUO OMO plus or minus UUO cubed UUO Ushuo florin UUO unregistered trademark OYUO UUO section OMO UUO plus or minus U. euro florin UU florin UU registered trademark UO plus or minus UO terahertz euro section UUsh O cubed UO ush UO terahertz MOO terahertz UO plus or minus euro paragraph UO terahertz shush OO cubed UO plus or minus UO MOO M UUO section OYO to the first UUO section OYO registered trademark UUO section OYO to the first UUO to the first UUO florin UUO paragraph UUO cubed UUO terahertz OMO cubed UO. You who have believed, do not take my enemies and your enemies as allies, extending to them affection while they have disbelieved in what came to you of the truth, having driven out the Prophet and yourselves, only because you believe in Allah, your Lord. If you have come out for jihad in my cause and seeking means to my approval, take them not as friends. You confide to them affection, but I am most knowing of what you have concealed and what you have declared. And whoever does it among you has certainly strayed from the soundness of the way. Toward the end of Muhammad's life, the word jihad appears again in the second to last chapter of the Quran, as Yusuf Ali cites. Verses 1 through 29 were revealed during the 10th month of the Islamic lunar calendar in the year 9AH. UUO florin UOMO terahertz florin UOYOMUO terahertz florin UUO registered trademark UOMUU florin UOYO squared UO terahertz florin UO to the first UOU use ho plus or minus UOU florin UOYUOM plus or minus. UUO section UUO terahertz plus or minus UOMAOO registered trademark UU florin UO cubed UO terahertz UUO section UUO cubed UOM florin UUO plus or minus UO paragraph UUO section OYOOM UO florin UUO plus or minus UO cubed UO terahertz UUush O cubed UOM ush UUO plus or minus UOM micron UUO section OO Europe per milli degree ush UOM UUOM plus or minus UUO UUO section ush UUush OOM UUO terahertz cubed ush you say, O Muhammad, if your fathers, your sons, your brothers, your wives, your relatives, wealth which you have obtained, commerce wherein you fear decline, and dwellings with which you are pleased are more beloved to you than Allah and His Messenger and jihad in His cause, then wait until Allah executes His command. And Allah does not guide the defiantly disobedient people. The combining form of jihad is jihad, when used with prefixes, for example, mu plus jihad plus deen equals mujahideen. Prefixes and suffixes share a relationship, for example, as a plural form, mu plus jihad plus dawna equals mujahiduna. Therefore, the basic construct of the combined form of jihad would be mujahid. To wage jihad, in the literal transliteration of the Quran, would be jihadan, OUO terahertz UO section. The combined form of jihad appears in the Quran in the same context of war. UUO section ush UO cubed UUush OOM UO terahertz to the first UOM UO plus or minus UOYUUush OOMO paragraph UO plus or minus UO plus or minus UOM UOUush O cubed UOM ush UOM OYUUO cubed UO paragraph UOM cubed UO to the first UU per mil OM UO terahertz to the first UOU O plus or minus UOOM ush UU florin UO section UO to the first UOM UO cubed UU per milli degree ush UO paragraph UOM UO to the first UU per mil OM UO terahertz to the first UO plus or minus euro. Section O to the first UO section, not equal are those believers remaining, at home other than the disabled, and the mujahideen, who strive and fight in the cause of Allah with their wealth and their lives. Allah has preferred the mujahideen through their wealth and their lives over those who remain behind, by degrees. And to both Allah has promised the best reward. But Allah has preferred the mujahideen over those who remain behind with a great reward. The meaning of jihad is also unique to Islam, and it means neither war or struggle. Most ostensibly it means fighting in the way, path or guidance of Allah to promulgate Islam. This can take many forms, from proselytizing to war. The context of the Quran is elucidated by the chronology and 6 holy biographies or hadith. The most authoritative, namely Bukhari and Muslim, always associates jihad with Muhammad's military career. There is a misconception that jihad is defined as an internal struggle to live by the tenets of Islam, specifically, faith, prayer, fasting, tithing, and pilgrimage. However, there is no historical or literary evidence that supports this extravagant definition. Usage of the term, in modern Standard Arabic, jihad is one of the correct terms for a struggle for any cause, violent or not, religious or secular. The terminology is also applied to the fight for women's liberation. The term jihad has accrued both violent and non-violent meanings. It can simply mean striving to live a moral and virtuous life, spreading and defending Islam, as well as fighting injustice and oppression, among other things. The relative importance of these two forms of jihad is a matter of controversy. A poll by Gallup showed that a significant majority of Muslim Indonesians define the term to mean sacrificing one's life for the sake of Islam, a just cause, or fighting against the opponents of Islam. In Lebanon, Kuwait, Jordan, and Morocco, the majority used the term to mean duty toward God, a divine duty, or a worship of God, with no militaristic connotations. Other responses referenced, in descending order of prevalence, a commitment to hard work, and achieving one's goals in life, struggling to achieve a noble cause, promoting peace, harmony or cooperation, and assisting others, living the principles of Islam. Distinction of greater and lesser jihad. In his work, The History of Baghdad, al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, an 11th-century Islamic scholar, referenced a statement by the companion of Muhammad Jabir ibn Abdillah. The reference stated that Jabir said, "The Prophet returned from one of his battles, and thereupon told us, 'You have arrived with an excellent arrival, you have come from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad, the striving of a servant against his desires.'" This reference gave rise to the distinguishing of two forms of jihad, greater and lesser. Some Islamic scholars dispute the authenticity of this reference and consider the meaning of jihad as a holy war to be more important. According to the Muslim jurist Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the quote in which Muhammad is reported to have said that greater jihad is the inner struggle, is from an unreliable source. This saying is widespread, and it is a saying by Ibrahim ibn Abla according to Nizari and al-Qunna. Ghazali mentions it in the Aliyah, and al-Iraqi said that Bayhaqi related it on the authority of Jabir and said, "There is weakness in its chain of transmission." Hajar al-Asqalani, Tasdid al-Kaus, see also Kashf al-Kafur unregistered trademark. The best of jihad. During the Arab Spring, many peaceful demonstrations in the Arab world faced violence and gunfire by their government's regime. The gunfire encouraged the protesters and led them to revolutions, based on their strong faith in what is called the best of jihad. The best of jihad was encouraged by their prophet, Muhammad, saying, "The best jihad is the word of justice in front of the oppressive sultan, ruler." In a battlefield context, when jihad is used to denote warfare, Ibn Yuhar cited the following hadith to explain the meaning of the best jihad. Ibn Hibban narrates, "The Messenger of Allah was asked about the best jihad. He said, 'The best jihad is the one in which your horse is slain and your blood is spilled.'" In a similarly worded hadith to the one above, Ibn Yuhar cited a hadith from Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, where it states that the highest kind of jihad is the person who is killed whilst spilling the last of his blood. Ahmed 4/144. It has also been reported that Muhammad considered performing Hajj to be the best jihad for Muslim women. Spiritual struggle. Muslim scholar Mahmoud Ayou states that the goal of true jihad is to attain a harmony between Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. In modern times, Pakistani scholar and professor Fazlur Rahman Malik has used the term to describe the struggle to establish just moral social order, while President Habib Bourguiba of Tunisia has used it to describe the struggle for economic development in that country. Warfare. Within classical Islamic jurisprudence, the development of which is to be dated into the first few centuries after the Prophet's death, jihad is the only form of warfare permissible under Islamic law, and may consist in wars against unbelievers, apostates, rebels, highway robbers and dissenters renouncing the authority of Islam. The primary aim of jihad as warfare is not the conversion of non-Muslims to Islam by force, but rather the expansion and defense of the Islamic State. In later centuries, especially in the course of the colonization of large parts of the Muslim world, emphasis has been put on non-militant aspects of the jihad. Today, some Muslim authors only recognize wars with the aim of territorial defense as well as the defense of religious freedom as legitimate. Whether the Quran sanctions defensive warfare only or commands an all-out war against non-Muslims depends on the interpretation of the relevant passages. This is because it does not explicitly state the aims of the war Muslims are obliged to wage. The passages concerning jihad rather aim at promoting fighters for the Islamic cause and do not discuss military ethics. In the classical manuals of Islamic jurisprudence, the rules associated with armed warfare are covered at great length. Such rules include not killing women, children and non-combatants, as well as not damaging cultivated or residential areas. More recently, modern Muslims have tried to reinterpret the Islamic sources, stressing that jihad is essentially defensive warfare aimed at protecting Muslims and Islam. Although some Islamic scholars have differed on the implementation of jihad, there is consensus amongst them that the concept of jihad will always include armed struggle against persecution and oppression. Debate, controversy has arisen over whether the usage of the term jihad without further explanation refers to military combat, and whether some have used confusion over the definition of the term to their advantage. Middle East historian Bernard Lewis argues that the overwhelming majority of classical theologians, jurists, and traditionalists understood the obligation of jihad in a military sense. Furthermore, Lewis maintains that for most of the recorded history of Islam, from the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad onward, the word jihad was used in a primarily military sense. Resistance against globalization. Benjamin Ababi used the term jihad to point out the resistant movement against globalization as well as the modern institutionalization of nation-states. The forces of jihad come from fundamentalist ethnic groups who want to protect their traditions, heritage and identity from modernization and universalized markets. The resistance has led to fragmented, small-scale violent conflicts between cultures, peoples and tribes. Although jihad strengthens the solidarity within the resisting group, it obeys to hierarchy and cannot tolerate foreign influence, which discourages democracy. Views of different Muslim groups. Ahmadiyya. In Ahmadiyya Islam, jihad is primarily one's personal inner struggle and should not be used violently for political motives. Violence is the last option only to be used to protect religion and one's own life in extreme situations of persecution. Quranists do not believe that the word jihad means holy war. They believe it means to struggle, or to strive. They believe it can incorporate both military and non-military aspects. When it refers to the military aspect, it is understood primarily as defensive warfare. Sunni. Jihad has been classified either as al-jihad al-akbar, the struggle against one's ego or self, or al-jihad al-asghar, the external, physical effort, often implying fighting. Jibril Haddad has analyzed the basis for the belief that internal jihad is the greater jihad, jihad al-akbar. Haddad identifies the primary historical basis for this belief in a pair of similarly worded hadith, in which Muhammad is reported to have told warriors returning home that they had returned from the lesser jihad of struggle against non-Muslims to a greater jihad of struggle against lust. Although Haddad notes that the authenticity of both hadith is questionable, he nevertheless concludes that the underlying principle of the superiority of internal jihad does have a reliable basis in the Quran and other writings. In contrast, the Hanbali scholar Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya did believe that internal jihad is important, but he suggests those hadith as weak which consider jihad of the heart-soul to be more important than jihad by the sword. Contemporary Islamic scholar Abdullah Yusuf Azzam has argued the hadith is not just weak but is in fact a false, fabricated hadith which has no basis. It is only a saying of Ibrahim ibn Abi Abdallah, one of the successors, and it contradicts textual evidence and reality. Muslim jurists explained that there are four kinds of jihad fi sabilillah. Jihad of the heart is concerned with combating the devil and in the attempt to escape his persuasion to evil. This type of jihad was regarded as the greater jihad. Jihad by the tongue is concerned with speaking the truth and spreading the word of Islam with one's tongue. Jihad by the hand refers to choosing to do what is right and to combat injustice and what is wrong with action. Jihad by the sword refers to qitl fi sabilillah, the most common usage by Salafi Muslims and offshoots of the Muslim Brotherhood. Some contemporary Islamists have succeeded in replacing the greater jihad, the fight against desires, with the lesser jihad, the holy war to establish, defend and extend the Islamic State. Sufic, the Sufic view classifies jihad into two parts, the greater jihad, and the lesser jihad. Muhammad put the emphasis on the greater jihad by saying, "Holy is the warrior who is at war with himself." In this sense, external wars and strife are seen as but a satanic counterfeit of the true jihad, which can only be fought and won within. There is no salvation for man without his own efforts being added to the work of self-refinement. In this sense it is the Western view of the Holy Grail which comes closest to the Sufic ideal, for to the Sufis, perfection is the Grail, and the Holy Grail is for those who, after they become perfect by giving all they have to the poor, then go on to become Abdul, or changed ones like Enoch, who was taken by God because he walked with God. Here the holy ones gain the surname Hadrat, or the presence. History. Early Muslim conquests. 2 years after the death of the Islamic prophet Muhammad in 632, Muslims under the leadership of Caliph Umar began military campaigns against the Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian Empire. In the Battle of Yarmouk in 636, Muslims defeated the Byzantine army, forcing the empire to withdraw from Syria. The Byzantines surrendered near Cairo in 641. The conquest of Alexandria, then capital of Egypt, took longer. Muslims faced little resistance from the locals as they had suffered under Byzantine rule. In the Battle of al-Qadisiyah in 637, where the Persian army was defeated. In 642, Muslims defeated the Persians at the Battle of Nahawand, opening up the plateau to Muslim conquest. Within 15 years Iran had been conquered. Muslims later pushed into Central Asia. Often called the Great Conquests, the role of Islam in them is debated. Medieval Arabic authors said that the conquests had been commanded by God. They were presented as orderly and disciplined, under the command of the Caliph. Many modern explanations dispute the idea that jihad was a motivating force in the conquests. They hold that Arabs on the eve of the conquests were poor and desertification in the Arabian Peninsula had reduced local resources. These explanations cite material causes as opposed to religion as the fundamental cause of the conquests. Some recent explanations cite both material and religious causes in the conquests. Muslim Brotherhood. In 1928, Hassan al-Banna founded the Muslim Brotherhood, a rigidly conservative and highly secretive Egyptian-based organization dedicated to resurrecting a Muslim empire. According to al-Banna, it is the nature of Islam to dominate, not to be dominated, to impose its law on all nations and to extend its power to the entire planet. The Muslim Brotherhood, also called Muslim Brethren, opposes the secular tendencies of Islamic nations and wants a return to the precepts of the Quran and rejection of Western influences. Al-Banna was born out of the extreme Muslim right-wing's desire to counter the ideology of modernization. The Brotherhood's platform included a strict interpretation of the Quran that glorified suicidal violence. Along with al-Banna, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj al-Amin al-Husseini was also an enormously influential Muslim leader of the time. Together, the two created a powerful and popular Islamist party by classically appealing to fundamentalist Islamic principles while blaming the world's problems on the Jews. Al-Banna also gave the group the motto it still uses today: Allah is our purpose, the Prophet our leader, the Quran our constitution, jihad our way, and dying for God our supreme objective. An important aspect of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology is the sanctioning of jihad, such as the 2004 fatwa issued by Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi making it a religious obligation of Muslims to abduct and kill U.S. citizens in Iraq. It advocated a war of Arabism and Islamic jihad against the British and the Jews. The Muslim Brotherhood waged a holy war against Syria after the Hama massacre. The BBC explains how the roots of jihad and the origins of bin Laden's concept of jihad can be traced back to two early 20th century figures, who started powerful Islamic revivalist movements in response to colonialism and its aftermath. Al-Banna blamed the Western idea of separation between religion and politics for Muslims' decline. In the 1950s, Syed Qutb, Muslim Brotherhood's prominent member, took the arguments of Al-Banna even further. For Qutb, all non-Muslims were infidels, even the so-called people of the book, the Christians and Jews. He also predicted an eventual clash of civilizations between Islam and the West. Qutb inspired a whole generation of Islamists, including Ayatollah Khomeini. The Muslim world widely accepted his ideology after the Arabs' defeat in the 1967 war. The Muslim Brotherhood has been involved in violent attacks. From its Islamic theme in its symbolism, on its flag a brown square frames a green circle with a white perimeter. Two swords cross inside the circle beneath a red Quran. The cover of the Quran says, "Truly, it is the generous Quran." The Arabic beneath the sword handles translates as "be prepared," a reference to a Quranic verse that talks of preparing to fight the enemies of God. It is among 17 groups categorized as terrorist organizations by the Russian government, as well as in Egypt, where they started to perform terrorist attacks, now banned by that government. In the Muslim Brotherhood's Conquest of Europe, a scholar states that its real goal is to extend the Islamic law of Sharia throughout Europe and the United States. MEMRI asserts that contemporary Islamism considers Islam to be under attack, and therefore, jihad is now a war of defense, and as such has become not only a collective duty but an individual duty without restrictions or limitations. That is, to the Islamists, jihad is a total, all-encompassing duty to be carried out by all Muslims, men and women, young and old. All infidels, without exception, are to be fought and annihilated, and no weapons or types of warfare are barred. Furthermore, according to them, current Muslim rulers allied with the West are considered apostates and infidels. One major ideological influence in Islamist thought was Sayyid Qutb. Qutb, an Egyptian, was the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood movement. He was convicted of treason for plotting to assassinate Egyptian President Gamal Abd al-Nasser and was executed in 1966. He wrote extensively on a wide range of Islamic issues. According to Qutb, there are two parties in all the world, the party of Allah and the party of Satan, the party of Allah, which stands under the banner of Allah and bears his insignia, and the party of Satan, which includes every community, group, race, and individual that does not stand under the banner of Allah. In the Holy Land Foundation case of the Palestinian Arab Al-Aryan's involvement in funding terror organizations, the Muslim Brotherhood's papers detailed a plan to seize the U.S. The group's takeover plot emerged when a handful of classified evidence was revealed detailing Islamist extremists' ambitious plans for a U.S. takeover. Terrorism researchers said, the memos and audio tapes, many translated from Arabic and containing detailed strategies by the international Islamist group the Muslim Brotherhood, are proof that extremists have long sought to replace the constitution with Sharia, or Islamic law, paving its way via a plot to form a complex network of seemingly benign Muslim organizations whose real job, according to the government, was to spread militant propaganda and raise money. The Muslim Brotherhood created some American Muslim groups and sought influence in others, many of which are listed as unindicted co-conspirators in the Holy Land case, such as CAIR. On a website devoted to Ramadan, the Muslim Brotherhood posted a series of articles by Dr. Ahmad Abd al-Khaliq about al-Wala wall-bearer, an Islamic doctrine which, in its fundamentalist interpretation, stipulates absolute allegiance to the community of Muslims and total rejection of non-Muslims and of Muslims who have strayed from the path of Islam. In his articles, the writer argues that according to this principle, a Muslim can come closer to Allah by hating all non-Muslims Christians, Jews, atheists, or polytheists and by waging jihad against them in every possible manner. Indeed, the Muslim Brotherhood is engaged in a long-standing war on the West. From 1948 until the 1970s it engaged in assassinations and terrorism in Egypt and has indoctrinated many who went on to commit acts of terror. Muslim Brotherhood Supreme Guide issued the statement, Al-Qaeda's bin Laden is a jihad fighter. The accused mastermind of the 9/11 terror massacre, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was raised in Kuwait and joined the Muslim Brotherhood at age 16. Warfare in Muslim societies. The major imperial Muslim dynasties of Ottoman Turkey and Persia each established systems of authority around traditional Islamic institutions. In the Ottoman Empire, the concept of Gaza was promulgated as a sister obligation to jihad. The Ottoman ruler Mehmed II is said to have insisted on the conquest of Constantinople by justifying Gaza as a basic duty. Later Ottoman rulers would apply Gaza to justify military campaigns against the Persian Safavid dynasty. Thus both rival empires established a tradition that a ruler was only considered truly in charge when his armies had been sent into the field in the name of the true faith, usually against Shiahs or heretics often meaning each other. The missionary vocation of the Muslim dynasties was prestigious enough to be officially reflected in a formal title as part of a full ruler style. The Ottoman Sultan Murad Khan II Koja Ghazi, sixth sovereign of the House of Osman, literally used Sultan al-Mujahideen. The so-called Fulbi jihad states and a few other jihad states in Western Africa were established by a series of offensive wars. The commands inculcated in the Quran on Muslims to fight those who will neither embrace Islam nor pay a poll tax were not interpreted as a general injunction on all Muslims constantly to make war on the infidels. It was generally supposed that the order for a general war can only be given by the caliph, but Muslims who did not acknowledge the spiritual authority of the caliphate, such as non-Sunnis and non-Ottoman Muslim states, always looked to their own rulers for the proclamation of a jihad. There has been in fact no universal warfare by Muslims on non-believers since the early caliphate. Some proclaimed jihad by claiming themselves as Mahdi, for example the Sudanese Muhammad Ahmad in 1882. Non-Muslim opinions. The United States Department of Justice has used its own ad hoc definitions of jihad in indictments of individuals involved in terrorist activities, as used in this first superseding indictment. Jihad is the Arabic word meaning holy war. In this context, jihad refers to the use of violence, including paramilitary action against persons, governments deemed to be enemies of the fundamentalist version of Islam. As used in this superseding indictment, violent jihad or jihad include planning, preparing for, and engaging in, acts of physical violence, including murder, maiming, kidnapping, and hostage-taking. In the indictment against several individuals including Joseph Copyright Padilla. In her book Muhammad, a biography of the Prophet, Karen Armstrong writes, fighting and warfare might sometimes be necessary, but it was only a minor part of the whole jihad or struggle. Maxime Rodinson, an Orientalist, wrote that jihad is a propagandistic device which, as need be, resorts to armed struggle two ingredients common to many ideological movements. In NATO countries, especially the United States, the term jihadist has been used in Western media as a synonym for mujahid, and frequently used to describe militant Islamic groups, including but not restricted to Islamic terrorism. Non-Muslim opinions about Muslim opinions. David Cook, author of Understanding Jihad, said in reading Muslim literature both contemporary and classical one can see that the evidence for the primacy of spiritual jihad is negligible. Today it is certain that no Muslim, writing in a non-Western language, would ever make claims that jihad is primarily non-violent or has been superseded by the spiritual jihad. Such claims are made solely by Western scholars, primarily those who study Sufism and/or work in interfaith dialogue, and by Muslim apologists who are trying to present Islam in the most innocuous manner possible. Cook argued that presentations along these lines are ideological in tone and should be discounted for their bias and deliberate ignorance of the subject, and that it is no longer acceptable for Western scholars or Muslim apologists writing in non-Muslim languages to make flat, unsupported statements concerning the prevalence either from a historical point of view or within contemporary Islam of the spiritual jihad. See also Ijtihad, Islam and War, Islamic Military Jurisprudence, Itmam al-Hujjah, Jihad in Hadith, Jihad Satire, Militant Islam, Mujahideen, Opinion of Islamic Scholars on Jihad, Sex Jihad, the British Government and Jihad, References. This article incorporates text from a publication now in the public domain, Chisholm, Hugh, ed. Encyclopædia Britannica. Cambridge University Press. Further reading.